So, doctor, just to make sure I've got my background information correct, you were an orthopedic surgeon at a small hospital, is that right?
Correct.
And you use both Dynamed and Dynamed Plus, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Dynamed Plus, I guess, is the most recent version.
Most recent version, okay, yes. And how long have you been using Dynamed, and then have you fully transitioned to Dynamed Plus, or do you still use both?
Dynamed Plus really is the one that I use the most. I probably transitioned maybe 4 or 5 years ago. That's when our hospital transitioned to Dynamed Plus also. So that's when I transitioned and started using it also.
Okay.
Almost exclusively.
All right. And then prior to that, how many years had you been using Dynamed approximately?
I would say probably in the 5 to 6 year range. I'm just trying to think. 5 years back, probably around, maybe 2007, 8, 9, something around there.
Okay. And in the past, have you ever used Clinical Key or Up to Date as reference tools?
I have used Up to Date, yeah. I mean, it's been a while since I did, but I have used Up to Date in the past.
Okay. All right. So, doctor, does your hospital handle the subscriptions for Dynamed and Dynamed Plus for you?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't personally subscribe. Okay.
No.
Do you know when Dynamed Plus came on board, were there any kind of free modules or a free trial period or anything like that?
I don't know for sure, but typically, I can tell you typically what happens in the hospital in general is that there is a trial period where we do use it. A product or something for at least 3 months.
Okay.
So that would be my assumption, is that's what happened also.
Okay. So, let's see. When you are using Dynamed, are you predominantly using it in the hospital, or are you also using it on a mobile device like a smartphone or an iPad? And do you ever use it from home, kind of?
Yeah, I do. I use it, I guess, from all 3 spots. I've used it at home, definitely in the hospital, definitely in the office, too.
Okay. Doctor, could I ask you to maybe come to the phone a little bit closer or something? You're fading in and out for me.
Sure.
Okay, all right. How long do you, how much time do you spend approximately each week on Dynamed Plus?
I'm probably, I would say, at least half an hour a day, sometimes 45 minutes, depending. I would say I'm probably in the, 2.5 to probably 4 hours range a week.
Okay. And when you are using it, what are the sort of different situations when you use Dynamed Plus? Like, first of all, do you use it at the point of care, at the patient bedside?
I have. I sometimes will. I guess I've been looking for like a medication interaction, or like a side effect, something along those lines. I typically am pretty good, I guess, with knowing the surgical aspect of stuff. But sometimes, when there's patients on a new medication I haven't heard of, or I'm looking to see if there's an interaction with something more to use, that's when I'm going to use it at the patient bedside.
Okay, and so that would be directly with the patient there in front of you, correct?
Correct.
Yep. And then do you, otherwise, do you use it in your office or at a workstation, kind of outside the patient's room? Where else do you access it?
I was going to say probably in the office at my desk. I have an area where I dictate, so that certainly is going to be something I'm going to look at too. Again, I feel pretty comfortable, I guess, with, treating many other things that I see, but every once in a while, if there's a different procedure that a surgeon did, or, I don't specialize in say, back or hand surgery, so if there's something that, maybe potentially along those lines, that there's a complication or issue, that's going to be at my desk, then I'm going to use that.
Okay. Sounds good. Doctor, if you don't mind, I'm going to dial you again because it's still not a great line. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to hang up and then call you again. Hopefully that might be a better line.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello? Yeah.
Yes. Is that better?
It is slightly better, I think. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Do you use Dynamed, just for general research on a topic? It's not necessarily patient related.
I do, yes. I mean, I find that one of the nice aspects of it is the researchability. To look up journal articles and get new, up-to-date information. So I certainly do use it also.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, and I'm sorry, I may have said up-to-date by mistake. I meant Dynamed. You use Dynamed for general research, correct?
Dynamed, I'm sorry. Correct, yeah. I'm
yes.
sorry. Yeah, I know you said.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. And then, do you ever use Dynamed for earning CMEs, educational credits, CMEs, CEs, that type of thing?
I mean, if they come through as something that's available to me, I do. And I can't say necessarily go there exclusively for it because I have other sources. But if I did come upon it, then I will use it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So when you're using Dynamed at the point of care for sort of making decisions, do you typically go with the answer that it gives you, or do you, go to a second source to double check, confirm, anything like that? How often, what % of time do you sort of follow the advice versus double check?
I would say probably 95% of the time I do follow through with the advice. I guess if there's something that I don't necessarily believe in, or if I believe something otherwise, maybe I'll second check it. But for the most part, I would say that I almost always believe it.
Okay. And if you do go to another source to check, what type of sources are you reaching out to?
It probably would be something more like an orthopedic specific. There's a couple websites that I will go to, like the AOS website, something like that, or a journal article in an orthopedic magazine. Okay. Or subscription.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is Dynamed Plus integrated with your institution's EHR?
It is. I mean, it's integrated in that I'm able to access it remotely through it. But there isn't, as far as I'm aware, like an actual connection on the electronic level, or able to import it all into the EHR.
So for example, when you are in Dynamed Plus, when you're in your EHR, is there like a icon or a drop down or something that you can hit?
Oh yeah, correct. Yeah. There is a link like that. Yeah, but I'm not able to import the data or anything into the EHR. But I can get to it through the EHR. Correct.
Okay, perfect. And what is the EHR platform that you're using, by the way, at your institution?
What is what?
The EHR platform, is it Epic, Cerner?
PowerChart, Cerner.
PowerChart from Cerner. Okay. So and is it like a single sign-on? So like when you sign into like a desktop in the morning, you're automatically signed into Dynamed Plus, and you're signed into PowerChart, and you're signed into other applications you may be using.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that there isn't any sort of data flow between Dynamed Plus and the EHR, but do you cut and paste information from Dynamed and put it into the EHR?
I mean, the majority of what I do, I dictate. So I would say that I maybe dictate what I have read on Dynamed, but I don't necessarily cut and paste.
Mm-hmm. So do you use something like kind of Dragon dictation or something?
Dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dragon, yeah.
Okay. And when you, so for example, you're in an EHR and then you launch Dynamed Plus, it's not picking up on, what the patient's diagnosis is or anything and searching on that, correct?
No, I still have to look for that.
Okay. is it useful then for you to have Dynamed Plus kind of accessible through the EHR if they're kind of, for the most part, well, they are somewhat operating independently?
I mean, you said, would it be useful?
Yeah, I mean, right now they're sort of integrated in the sense that you've got you can access Dynamed Plus through your EHR. But is that useful to you, or would it just as easily be useful if they were both, available separately?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly useful to me. I mean, I guess if it was available separately, that would be useful too. I guess if I ever had to be in a situation, where I needed to access it, not involving anything with the hospital. I mean, I guess if there was a situation where I left the hospital or I was in I had to do something different, then, I mean, it obviously would be useful if I had, the ability to get it otherwise.
Okay. So just to be clear, right now, your only access to Dynamed Plus is through the EHR. If you were to tap into it from your mobile device or from home or something, you're essentially not able to get into Dynamed Plus, is that correct?
Well, I'm able to because I have EHR access through my mobile phone or my like home login. So there's remote login capabilities.
Okay, so through your mobile phone, you still do that two-step process whereby you go into the EHR first and then into Dynamed Plus.
Yeah, I'll have it separately, correct?
Yeah. Okay, got it. Okay. Let's see. So we're going to talk now, firstly, about the user interface of Dynamed Plus. We're going to get into content later on, but right now, just in terms of user interface, I mean how you search it, how you navigate, how the content presents itself. What do you think are the strengths of Dynamed's user interface, and are there weaknesses?
I would say the strength is that it's very pleasing to the eye. It's very easy to search. I like that when you first log in, there's recent updates. I find that the mobile interface is very easy to use. Sometimes that can be difficult because the screen is so small, but I find that is helpful. I think that maybe some of the weaknesses is that in some of the very nitpicky orthopedic stuff, that's maybe very specialized. Sometimes it's not I guess as specific on some of that. But again, I don't use it as a source for that. That's something that I find in my specialty specific journal articles, or I just assume that I know myself. Mm-hmm. But I like how it's set up. As far as when you do search it, sort of the epidemiology, the etiology. I mean, it's very thorough. I find that when you go down the left side of the screen, when you do use it, that it kind of flows in order. Of how you would think about the patient as far as the history, the exam, and treatment. Then I also like that there's some coding available too, which with ICD-10 has been very helpful.
So a couple of questions there. I think you said that the mobile interface is easy, but obviously the screen is small. Is that the challenge of reading the data?
Yeah, exactly. That's a challenge. I mean, I don't find that it's not useful or something that that would prevent me from using it. I think that's just kind of that's a limitation, I guess, of any mobile program. But that can sometimes be annoying,
Okay. And so it's easy to search, and then there's this menu that pops up on the left that kind of follows a logical flow of how you might work up a patient, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the weaknesses, you mentioned weaknesses which were sort of more content specific. Are there any weaknesses to the user interface? Could something be better about how the information is laid out, or how you navigate through, or anything like that?
I'm not aware of it. I mean, I guess there's nothing specific with the interface. I mean, I find that it's very easy to use. The print is very clear. That the sign is easy. I really don't have, And I guess maybe if there was a little bit more of an outline, I guess if, when you first logged on, if it, defaulted to some, content specific or some specialty, specific information, that would be helpful. But beyond that, I think the interface is perfectly fine.
Okay, so this menu or this kind of list that pops up on the left side, that's not like an outline then of the area. It's more of an outline of how you work through, the workflow of the patient. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of searching, do you typically, when you're searching Dynamed Plus, do you typically just put in a word or a phrase, or do you pose your inquiry in the form of a question like you might do in Google?
I typically just put in the diagnosis that I'm looking for or the med. I typically am looking usually to kind of confirm what I know. What I mean? I guess I'm not blindly searching. And, I have a diagnosis, and I'm looking to see for some reason if there's a different recommended follow-up or something. I don't usually form it as a question necessarily.
Okay. So would it be useful to have like a Google style search box instead of the current search approach to Dynamed Plus, or are you satisfied with what you have?
I'm satisfied with what I have. I guess, it obviously would be difficult if you didn't know what you're looking for, but, I think there's a little bit of a responsibility on your end to at least have an idea. I guess the diagnosis or, I'm usually looking at this as a way to kind of confirm or, I guess just update myself regarding treatment or follow-up, not so much to necessarily give me the diagnosis. So I think you have to have a reasonable idea and not just search like on a question.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And in terms of, is the searching therefore pretty intuitive, or do you sometimes, you type in a diagnosis or a word and it just kind of takes you to someplace unexpected, or what you're looking for is kind of buried amongst a list of other things?
I guess that certainly can happen. I think maybe what you're looking for gets buried in the fact that maybe you're brought to a specific diagnosis and you have to look through the etiology or the background or follow-up or whatever. That can sometimes be a little bit buried. I guess if you, and again, I don't typically do this, but I guess if you were to, so for example, look up ankle sprain, a recommended, most recent recommended follow-up, I guess if it was able to bring it up for you. But typically my normal practice is to go to the diagnosis and then just search myself, through the layout to look what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm.
And do you find what you're looking for fairly quickly, or do you sometimes have to, is that a time-consuming process? How does that work?
Yeah, it can be a little bit of a process, I guess. You can certainly get in the weeds or you can get lost a little bit, so that would be helpful, I guess, if there was an additional way or an avenue to get a little bit more direct. If there was a little bit different algorithm that would match your search, I guess would be helpful. But again, I think in general, if you treat it as, as a tool, I guess if you're using it to completely guide you, then it's easy to kind of, get lost and not know what you're looking for. But if you use it as a way to kind of confirm or to get small updates, then it's much more helpful. I think you less chance of getting lost,
Right. Okay. All right. Let's see. So now let's talk about content. And first of all, can you just give me a couple of examples of the types of medical topics you search for? Realizing, of course, that there's probably a very broad spectrum, but are there some things that you typically do search?
Typically more of the, again, I don't usually look at it more from a surgical standpoint. I'm looking at more from a medical standpoint within orthopedics. We do treat many people with diabetes, and there's certainly correlation there regarding diabetes and infections and surgery. So I usually look up some, recent, updated diabetes medications. There always seems to be new diabetes medications coming out. as well as antibiotics, which bacteria that they cover, applications. And then we don't do a ton of rheumatoid patients, although we do see some crossover there with them. And I usually, often will use it as a way to search through, rheumatoid medications and, different efficacies or studies. Often too with a lot of the osteoporotic medications or osteoporosis drugs.
Okay.
I'll use that too.
All right. So what are the strengths of Dynamed Plus's content, and what are the weaknesses?
I would say the strength is that it's very broad. It's not too often that I ever have anything that I cannot find. That is, like, it's laid out very stepwise and very, very thorough. It's backed up with very good data. I would say some of the weaknesses is that if you get into some pretty, very specific specialty stuff, sometimes it isn't the best resource. But again, I think you're misusing it at that point. That's not really what's expected of it.
And what about things like, the guidelines and protocols that you might find on Dynamed? Are they clear to follow? Are they well laid out? Content?
Yeah, I think they're clear to follow. They're well laid out. I think sometimes, too much information can be a problem too, where you can, like I said, you can kind of get in the weeds and you can, start looking at too many studies in that. But I find that it's laid out very quickly. I find there's a strong and a weak recommendation, and some of the recommendation stuff. So, I think it's laid out well. I don't find that it has a ton of weakness regarding the content at all.
You mentioned a moment ago, sometimes you get too much information. Is that a concern with Dynamed Plus?
I don't think it's a concern. I think that's a concern, I guess, if you don't know what you're looking for. I don't think it's a concern with the resource itself, because again, if you're able to kind of guide yourself to a large degree as to what you're looking for, but when you have a very good resource that's very thorough, and you're lost, it can become a problem, because it doesn't always just totally point you in the specific right direction. But no, I don't. Again, if used appropriately, I don't think that is a problem.
Okay. And is Dynamed Plus a significant improvement on the prior Dynamed version from your perspective?
I think it is. Yeah, I think I think the content is much better. I think the user interface, and it seems like the search function is much easier to use too.
Okay. And do you trust the content that you get from Dynamed?
I do. Yeah. I do. I use it as a resource. So I guess I'd be lying if I said I didn't trust it, because I use the recommendations. So.
Can you pinpoint, what some of the factors are that kind of instills that sense of trust for you?
I would say that, when you have, for whatever reason, if I've had to correlate or cross-reference it, I found that to be true. I would say, they both had, I guess, no issues with their recommendations that have been laid out that I've followed. So that's why I found it to be true.
Okay. And Doctor, you faded out in the first part of your comment. You mentioned that you have no issues with the recommendations. You find the references to be true, but I think you said something before that when you faded out.
Sorry. The recommendations. I guess I don't know what I was saying. Yeah, no. I haven't had any issues. I've cross-referenced it. And everything I've done, I've had no follow-up patient issues or bad treatment. So I haven't had any problems.
Okay, fair enough. How relevant do you find the content for your needs?
Very relevant.
And in terms of recency, is it pretty recent?
I would say it's very recent. A lot of what I'm looking for, the the appropriate time period or the appropriate reference period is more. It's well within what I see with Dynamed Plus.
So, do you sort of know that it's recent because each piece of content has like if you search a diagnosis, so that diagnosis has a date to it, or are you judging the recency based on the references that it's citing?
References. It's the references that they look at that I'm looking at the recency.
So
studies or anything along those lines.
Okay. So a kind of, does it give you like a profile of a diagnosis and that has references, or it leads you to, you say diagnosis and it points you to 3 or 4 articles that are about diagnosis?
It's the articles that it points me to that I would use as the most updated, the most recent references that it's pointing to.
Right. Okay. And overall, I mean, in terms of comprehensiveness of data, I understand you've said it doesn't have very specific information, for example, on orthopedics, but overall, is it comprehensive, or do you have some unmet needs? Are there some areas of content which you wish it did cover or covered in more depth?
I think it is comprehensive. Covering in more depth. I mean, again, just from a selfish standpoint, more surgical stuff. If it was, I guess you'd have to. It would almost probably be like Dyna Surgical Plus. You know what I mean? I think you may have to, look at a little bit different program or approach with it. But just from a selfish standpoint, some just very, very, very specific surgical, procedure outlines, and then follow up with that. But again, I don't expect that from the product. That's not what it should be used for in my mind. So.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So, what are the key things about Dynamed Plus that you value the most, and why? What are your top 2 or 3 things that you value most about it?
I value most the ease of access, the ease of use. The very thorough nature of how it's laid out as far as use once you get in there. And then, like I said, I really like the ICD-10 aspect of it too. I find that that's most helpful for me because there's many times where either I don't want to Google it or I'm not aware of a specific diagnosis code, but I'm aware of the diagnosis and how to treat it. But it's a code that I need, so I find that it's been very helpful for that.
So, tell me a little bit more about that. If you could maybe give me a patient context or something. I'm curious to learn more about the ICD-10. I mean, does it kind of give you a range of, gives you 5 or 6 different codes depending on the specific aspects of a procedure you're going to do? If you can just tell me more about this.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the ICD-10 coding, there's kind of initial, there's subsequent, there's sequela, especially with like fractures. There's tons of fractures codes as far as non-union or malunion or delayed union or subsequent issues. And even though ICD-10 is very thorough, for many diagnoses there isn't a word for word, a specific correlating diagnosis. So it lays it out nicely. I'm able to search the diagnosis, and then all the appropriate ICD-10 codes come up. So it really narrows it down for me and helps me save a lot of time.
So is it like, does a table pop up and it kind of describes the diagnosis and then it gives you the code? Is that how the layout is? And is it similar to how you might search ICD-10 codes elsewhere?
Correct, yeah. I would say that's how it's laid out, and that's how it's similar.
Okay, so kind of like a tree structure, and you kind of drill down to where you want to go?
Correct.
Okay. So, we've talked a little bit about content and user interface. Can you give me now kind of a case study, a use case of a particular patient who came in, what the background to that patient was, and how you used Dynamed, what you searched for, and how you used the data to kind of move forward with the patient treatment or surgery?
Sure. There was a patient recently who was on a new biologic rheumatoid medication that I wasn't aware of. They were scheduled for surgery. I was seeing them before surgery to review the procedure with them, as well as review any risks and benefits and talk about going off medication. And I wasn't aware of the medication that they were on. It was a rather new medication, and I know that some of these medications, can interfere with wound healing and and infection rates. So I used Dynamed to look up the medication, see what it was indicated for, see the dosing, and then there was some documentation regarding recommendation after starting after orthopedic procedures. So I was able to reference it. It gave me a time period. It saved me the time of calling the other rheumatologist, playing phone tag with them back and forth, and then following up regarding the medication. So.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things, we've been speaking to a number of physicians about Dynamed, as well as the other tools like UpToDate. And one of the things that we've heard is that Dynamed has better content when it comes to the atypical patient. I appreciate you don't currently use UpToDate, but do you have any sense of that? Do you find that you get to these atypical patients and you can find good data there? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say I can certainly see that just because it's so thorough. You know what I mean? So I can certainly appreciate that. There's many times where I've typed in a diagnosis, and again, I'm not talking surgical here, but there's been many times I've typed in a diagnosis where I guess expected, rather average content, and it was very good. So I would have to agree with it. I wouldn't disagree.
Okay. And how, is this coverage of atypical patient situations, is that kind of a higher value to you versus kind of...
I think it is, because again, I think when you're going to use these resources, it's not going to be for the most routine patient, right? You're going to be going to this when there's something that you're not quite sure about. So that in of itself just lends itself to some kind of unusual circumstances or unusual patient. So I think that certainly is definitely a value add there.
Okay. All right. So when you were first introduced to Dynamed Plus, kind of moving on to a different section of questions here, when you first started to use Dynamed Plus, was there any kind of training provided by the publisher or any kind of webinars you attended, or it was like you just got in one day and it was no longer Dynamed and it was now Dynamed Plus?
Yeah, that's basically what it was. There was no training from what I can remember at all.
Okay. And was it fairly intuitive to start searching, or did you have some issues?
No, it was fairly intuitive. I didn't really have any issues at all. I figured it out pretty quickly.
And I guess, are you using Dynamed Plus because, in a way, that's the tool that you've always used, or did you had used UpToDate in the past? Was there some sort of kind of a transition when you switched over to Dynamed? There wasn't a transition necessarily due to UpToDate, at all in regards to I wasn't happy with it. I forget the exact circumstances exactly, but it was just that Dynamed was available, and then ultimately it was upgraded to Dynamed Plus. So, I've been happy with it, and I haven't had a reason to necessarily switch it also. Okay. And then in terms of communication, is there any kind of communication that comes from the publishers of Dynamed to you? So that would be EBSCO. Does anything come to you about, hey, we've got this new content, or we've got this new capability, or did you even get any kind of email when you first moved to Dynamed Plus to say, hey, you're now a Dynamed Plus user and this is what it means?
Yeah, I think when I first, like I said, going through the EHR when I first logged in, there may have been something, but again, honestly, I don't remember specifically. Honestly, I don't check my work specific email enough to know if there's a regular update or anything. I'm actually bad about that. Mm-hmm. But when I signed up, I'm pretty sure that there was something.
Okay. So, would it be useful from, for publishers to reach out to users like yourself from time to time to say, hey, we've got this, new content and has been written by a particular, expert in the field, or we now have, information in this space that we didn't have before. Is that kind of communication useful to you? Would that be welcomed by you or not?
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, only because you can't always stay on top of everything that's new or different. I guess it would be most helpful if there was some update that was, more, like I said, more specialties, specific, so they could, update you on anything that was updated new in orthopedic. I mean, I guess I'm not really all that, all that interested in different specialties, so it has to be kind of narrowed down to my kind of range of things. But if it was, it would be helpful. I mean, maybe a study or something that would pop up that I would, that I'd want to watch or not watch, but look at.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, I kind of missed the last bit there. You said something about watching. So did you mean video content or something else?
Oh yeah, like video content or like look at a study. Okay. I mean, if there was a study that was that came out that was different or new that was involving a diagnosis that I treated a lot, that would be helpful. That way, it's something where it's kind of nice to know. You don't have to go out and look for it, but it's nice to know kind of thing.
Yeah. And how would you want that communication come through to you? Would you want some sort of alert when you get into Dynamed Plus, or would you want an email sent or something sent to you in the mail?
I would say right Dynamed Plus would be, right when I logged in, if there was some way to update it that way would be most helpful.
Okay. All right. So let's see. Next set of questions are, yes. So other tools. So apart from Dynamed Plus, and you mentioned, that you go to the association websites. What other reference tools do you use, kind of on a regular basis?
I would say probably, again, a lot of it's just going to be, I guess, something like this, and then other like specific journal articles. I mean, I probably don't reference those as much, but on a monthly basis, when I get the journal articles, not so much necessarily to reference as much as I'm just doing it to update my knowledge. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that conferences, something along those lines, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And do you ever have need to use some sort of a textbook or a handbook or some sort of a guidebook or anything like that?
Not typically. I mean, I guess if I would, it would be for, a sort of surgical procedure I haven't done in a while. I had to look into one of my older books from training. But I would say on a regular basis, I'm probably not referencing textbooks that often.
And is there a go-to textbook that you would most likely tap into if you wanted to refresh yourself on a procedure?
Like I said, if I did, it would be one of my textbooks from training. Mm-hmm. Which are usually more specific to the to the surgical area, either shoulder, hip, knee, foot, ankle, whatever.
So it sounds like there isn't like the one textbook that you go to. They're split by regions of the body.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. let's see. Were you at all involved in any decisions around evaluating Dynamed Plus or Dynamed, you know, when it came on board at your institution? Or has it always been there and you've just used the tool that's been there?
Yeah, it's always been there. I just used it. I mean, I wasn't part of any committee or any specific group that evaluated it or, has been monitoring it.
Okay. So we're going to talk now about next generation tools, you know, what you would like to see in the future, kind of like a wish list. So what new features or functionality or even content would you like to see in a next generation clinical information tool?
I mean, I would say certainly everything, that's included now. I think the biggest thing, if I had to think of anything, would be something more from a surgical standpoint, where if there was, the videos or, not only say virtual reality, but, kind of like first person, looks at, surgical procedures that are different or newer techniques that different people are doing. I think that probably would be most interesting to me specifically.
Anything else from a kind of video content perspective? So you mentioned surgical procedures. Would they be, are you looking for long clips, short clips? Do you have a sense of how long these should be?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be really kind of specific to, exactly what it is that, I guess if it's surgical, how long the, I guess related to the procedure. I guess I wouldn't expect the surgical clip to be 30 seconds if it was, regarding a new procedure. I mean, I would assume those would be probably in the 10 to probably 20-minute range.
Do you currently use any video content? Do you go and seek that type of information prior to some surgeries?
Yeah, I have. At some of our conference-related material, our society-related material, AAOS, American Academy of Orthopedic Surgery. There is some of that there that I have looked at before.
Okay. All right. Anything else outside of video content that would be useful from a content perspective?
No, that probably for me myself, that would be the most pertinent stuff.
Okay. And then what about kind of the user interface, how you use the content, how you access it, navigate through it, any kind of, in your next generation tool, what would you like to see?
Well, I mean, I think everything that's included now, access, again, I guess this is kind of going to be futuristic, but if there was any sort of like virtual reality, type technology that came about at some point there, that would be, extremely helpful from a surgical standpoint. That could be something which, again, I don't think John made a practice of this, but, during the procedure itself, if there was a, situation where you got stuck or something wasn't going appropriately, you could, real time kind of look at things, through like a virtual reality setup or in the OR. But again, that's futuristic, and I don't think most people want to depend on, something like that when they're doing an actual procedure.
Okay. And that's, that's sort of it, exactly, we are looking for those futuristic ideas. So I've got here two kind of early stage ideas for, next generation point of care, clinical reference tools. I'd like to read each one out to you and then get your perspective on them. So the first one is a tool populated with image-based clickable flowcharts as a replacement to text-heavy monographs. How does that concept sound?
Well, I guess if it makes the screen less dirty, it's a little bit easier to follow. I guess that wouldn't be a bad idea. I guess I'd have to look at it and use it, see how easy it was to use, but it doesn't sound like it would be a horrible option for something to look at.
Okay. And then the second idea here is a platform that drives patient contextualized information into the search of a reference tool automatically to drive more precise results?
I guess the fact that you would be able to, get more precise results quicker, that would be helpful too, I guess, just to, narrow it down for you. I find that it's, the screen can certainly be busy, but I think if you're able to narrow down what you're looking for, it's okay. But, I can say that would be helpful. I guess it would really, honestly, again, depend on the fact that you have issues with, being too busy and not being able to narrow it down now.
Mm-hmm. So, where do you think this patient contextualized information, where should it ideally come from that's driving the reference tool?
Probably the ICD-10 the diagnosis itself would be the one that probably would be the most direct. And
this would be housed presumably in the EHR, I'd assume.
Correct. Yeah, you have to link that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's see. And then a couple of other questions on around next generation tool. We've heard about the use of AI and machine learning to make searches better. Do you think that there's a need for that? Would you be interested in AI or machine learning coming into the picture?
I guess if it would be helpful, it would be fine. But again, I find that for the most part, I kind of know what I'm looking for specifically, So I don't know if it would totally change the way that I search, but again, I don't think it would hurt in the long run.
Have you actually come across any examples of AI or machine learning coming into the fray in terms of information tools, reference tools, anything like that?
At this point, I'm not aware of any.
Okay. So, hypothetically, when you're sort of in, well, not necessarily hypothetically, but when you're in Dynamed Plus and you're looking for information, are there any situations where you feel you're not, being shown the right content or getting to the right content, and it would be helpful if there was some sort of AI or machine learning interface involved?
Yeah, I don't, because again, I'm usually searching a singular name of a diagnosis or a medication. So I don't find that. But again, I think if you didn't really have a good idea, it may be helpful. But for myself, no, I don't find that that's the case.
Okay. And then another thing that's come up is that we've heard some physicians say that in the next generation of tools, they want the data to flow both ways between a clinical reference tool like a clinical key or Dynamed Plus. So between that and the electronic health record. What do you think about that? Would that be important to you?
Again, I think if it could auto-populate based on diagnosis, that would be helpful. I guess I'm not specifically always looking through this resource for every patient. So I don't know if on every patient I would need that ability to do that. When it's needed, I'm sure it'd be very helpful. But I just, I guess I would just wonder if it would get, if it would be a little overused or not necessary for every single patient. But if you were to do it, to link it would probably be the most productive way to go about it.
Mm-hmm. And other than ICD-10 codes, are there any other data elements that you would want to flow, from the EHR to the to the reference tool like Dynamed Plus?
Probably the ICD-10 code, I guess, to narrow it down for you, and then probably the biggest thing you'd be looking at would be medication and treatment recommendations.
So that's kind of looking at the content flowing from Dynamed Plus to the EHR. What about things flowing from the EHR to the Dynamed Plus? So looking at it both ways, essentially.
Yeah. I think maybe what you want have the flow in would be like current patient medications. You know what I mean? Something currently that the patient has, so to try to get a picture of the patient, it would be the patient medications, the patient diagnoses, which would be covered by ICD-10. I think that would be pretty good pretty good way to get the majority of what you're going to be looking for potentially into Dynamed from the EHR.
Okay. And then, do you use sort of any tools that are kind of decision tree based, clinical pathways based? Do you use anything like that, that sort of flowchart type driven tools?
Not on a regular basis, no.
Yeah. Okay. And have you heard of, or have you ever, seen or used a tool called Visual DX? That again has come up in our conversations.
Not personally enough to talk about it, no.
Okay, great. Finally, anything else that comes to your mind, based on other types of tools that you've seen, not necessarily reference tools, but anything else that you've seen in the healthcare realm or heard about at conferences or seen at exhibitors, and you think, this is kind of interesting, and it points to where tools might go in the future?
No, the only thing really, I guess, would be kind of more like that, like virtual reality, like real-time stuff, but nothing beyond that.
And have you seen examples of virtual reality in kind of your realm or other realms of healthcare?
No, only, I think I said that at a conference one time, there was a booth that had it set up, I think, with some like real-time surgery stuff, but nothing really beyond that.
Okay, sounds good. Well, great. Doctor, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate all of your insights. It's been most helpful talking to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, bye-bye.